Hey everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, All Things Taylor, with yours truly, just in time for Q&A Wednesday. So last week I did not do a Q&A Wednesday because I didn't see any questions that weren't already repeats. So I didn't want to waste everyone's time with the same question that we've probably already answered several times over during the course of our time doing Q&A Wednesdays together. So this week I did happen to see some brand new questions. So here we go. First off, guys, I am just loving my BC Lions hat. Yay! I love sports, guys. I'm such like a tomboy. It's hilarious. Which is very, like, when people look at me, it's just very unexpected. So it just makes me laugh. Anyways, so my first question comes from Twitter. I'm hollering at you guys. You guys are awesome on there. Welcome to all of my new subscribers to my YouTube channel. This is a weekly thing, so get ready. Fasten your seatbelts. We are in for a bumpy ride, courtesy of Betty Davis, my idol. So my first question comes from Twitter, and they asked me who would my dream match be against. And it's kind of funny that I can actually say that one of my dream matches that I dreamed of when I was a kid already happened. So one of my all-time favorite women, when I was first getting to like sneak peeks of wrestling, because I wasn't allowed to watch it when I was young. And then, you know, finally my family gave up the fight and allowed me to watch it. And I just immediately fell in love with these women. And one of the women stood out to me so much because of her like psychotic sort of character, and she looked different from everyone else, and she just looked so fierce and stuff. So I loved Victoria, especially when she was feuding with Trish, and then insert Jazz into the scene, and Molly Holly and Lita. Oh, it was just amazing. So I was heavily influenced by Victoria. And so fast forward to me being like a freshly turned 23-year-old, and I go to Impact Wrestling in Orlando, Florida at the Impact Zone in Universal, and I'm there backstage for several hours before anyone tells me who I'm wrestling or what I'm doing. So I have no idea. I'm just like green girl number 7. Hi guys, my name's Taylor. like so dorky, right? And then, you know, Eric Bischoff's there, Dixie Carter's there, Velvet Skies, they were like all these people. Nobody's paying me any mind whatsoever, and I'm just like, hi, my name is Taylor. And then finally someone from management comes over to me when I'm just sitting at catering, not even know. I'm like, what do I do with my hands? And they tell me I'm wrestling Tara, aka Victoria, Lisa Marie Varon. And it was like, that was like the best case scenario that they had prepared me for. They prepared me for like a best case scenario for who I could wrestle, and like the worst case scenario for a debut on who I could wrestle. I won't say who the worst case scenario was, but in the management's mind at OVW at that time, they were like, if this was your debut, this is the best person who you could like at that time that they would put you against, because of certain other people already being in storylines as far as the women were concerned, as far as the knockouts. And then like, this is the worst person you could debut against. So that was like really funny that they did that. They prepared me for that. And, you know, I had my, you know, my top 7 things that I could do, you know, and all that stuff. And it was just so cool. Like, she was like extremely nice to me and stuff. And I actually got to do a few things, which was crazy. And I remember like she called Trish Stratus to ask if we could do the Stratosphere, which was really funny. And like, I remember Mickie James was like, hey girl, like, I know you're talented, but you probably need to find a new favorite wrestler. And I think she was referencing like my kick and the Stratosphere. But like, what Mickie didn't know at that time was like, the kicks and stuff I was doing wasn't mimicking Trish Stratus. It was actually, you know, because of my martial arts background. When I was a kid, my mother signed me up for Taekwondo. And as an adult, I had gone back and finished. And so, yeah, I'm a black belt in Taekwondo. And so it was just very funny. I was just like, and then like years later, I still love Mickie James. Like, I love when her and I were at Shimmer at one point. Like, we just sat down and talked for like over an hour backstage and stuff. And like, she really went to bat for me at my last appearance at Impact, which at that time I didn't know was going to be my last appearance. And she like went to the agent and like fought for me to have more stuff to do in that match on TV and stuff on Spike. It was so cool. I think it was in like Atlanta, Georgia. So one of my like dream matches was to get to wrestle Victoria, and I got to do that. I would love to have a rematch. That would be the ultimate. Another person who was a dream of mine to wrestle was Mickie James. So another woman that I would want to wrestle would be Trish Stratus, and another one would be Molly Holly. And another dream match of mine, which I think would have to be this year because she's on her retirement tour, it would end up being Jazz. I was so influenced by Jazz. And if I could have the power of like resurrection, I would definitely say Sherry Martel, because I was so influenced by her after I started wrestling and went back and watched a bunch of people in the business like Paul Orndorff and, you know, Randy Savage. And I watched tons of Brian Pillman promos, and I watched like Buddy Rose, and I watched so many people that people wouldn't realize. I was like obsessed with Mr. Perfect, and just so many people. Velvet McIntyre, Princess Victoria, who is actually a mentor of mine. I would love to have been able to wrestle her before her neck got like severely broken. So anyways, those are just some of the many people. As far as other women on the independents, I would love to either tag with or wrestle with Priscilla Kelly. I really dig her vibe. Alex Gracia, Jazz, like I had already said. I'd wrestled several times with Kira Hogan. She's very, very talented. There's a lot of women that I would be like, check, 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 check. Like, I just love wrestling, all kinds of wrestling. So another question came from my YouTube channel. This person is like a diehard loyal on my YouTube channel, and they were asking me a very awesome question that's very kind of in-depth and smart. So I thought it was a really cool question. They asked me in particular, what is more important, knowing what the crowd or audience in that part of the world wants to see where you're performing, or is it more important for what you and your opponent can do as far as like signature stuff and whatnot and getting your spots in? The answer is both are somewhat important, but circumstances would dictate what's more important than the other, whether it be the former or the latter. To me, I think it's always vitally important to understand what sort of audience you have. You know, in Memphis, Tennessee, you probably aren't going to wrestle the same exact way you would wrestle in Los Angeles, California, for example. Just like the Lucha Libre in Mexico is not the same sort of Lucha Libre that you would see in the United States. It's like a watered down, different sort of version. Kind of, sort of, but it depends on the market. California, especially certain parts of Southern and specific parts of Northern California, have a very rich culture and authentic Lucha Libre. Whereas down South is more storytelling, Tennessee stomp sort of, you know, style, which I got very familiar with OVW. And then, you know, the Ring of Honor style is very spot, almost like a slightly lower key as far as aggression wise, to like a New Japan. And then, you know, WWE style isn't the exact same as AEW. Impact, it has its own little bit, especially when it was doing the six-sided ring. So it really just all depends on the market and where you are and how you appeal. Like some people, they only really appeal to an adult audience, where some people's characters really appeal to everyone. You know, especially a look, like even down to how you look appeals to a certain demographic. So that's all business. That's all stuff you need to understand. But at the same time, you should also be working with the crowd while still dictating the pace, but keeping them involved because they paid the tickets. They contribute to the authentic vibe of what's going on. You know, if you're wrestling for yourself, it's not going to be the same sort of interaction between you and the crowd and what the crowd likes and dislikes, you know. But with that being said, no matter what market you're in, you can still do what you do. It just changes a little bit. Just like you can still do the same moves as a heel that you would do as a babyface, just how you do them changes. The mannerisms you use change, the cockiness level changes, the certain changes. So that's like old school psychology that I really learned from like Rip Rogers and OVW and learning a lot of that. And I think that applies everywhere. And that mentality helped me get WWE extra spots, and it also got me my WWE tryout, and then it also served me pretty well at Ring of Honor and on the independents. So I think it's some pretty good advice. So always know what you and your opponent are capable of and want to make magic and make each other look good, but also be aware of the environment you're in and the demographic. You know, if you're at an all kids show, should you be doing certain types of adult content? Probably not, you know. So it's common sense, but common sense isn't always so common. Someone saw me putting over Mr. Perfect because he was actually trending yesterday, which was really cool. The WWE put out a tweet on who they thought was the best WWE superstar who never won the WWE Championship title. And so many people were saying like Mr. Perfect and Owen Hart and stuff, that Mr. Perfect was actually trending. Like almost 2 decades after his death. I thought that was amazing. It made me so happy. And so someone actually asked me who were some people that I was very influenced by and studied. Well, studying tape, I went back and watched a lot of stuff prior to going to OVW, but tape study was something very much stressed by Rip Rogers. And it's actually what put me over to quite a few veterans, like one of my mentors now, Princess Victoria. You know, she was, you know, an NWA women's champion. She was WWF tag team champions with Velvet McIntyre. Like, this one performed all over the world, you know, and women like that, I honestly feel paved the way for women like me. I think they started the women's wrestling revolution, not in the past 10 years, but like 30 years ago, you know. Regardless of that opinion, so I was very heavily influenced by Princess Victoria, Velvet McIntyre, Sherry Martel, Wendy Richter, like I was saying before, Victoria, Trish, Mickie James. I loved watching Leilani Kai. I watched a lot of Paul Orndorff. He actually did a Tombstone Pile Driver, and going back watching some of his stuff, I was like, oh, maybe I can do this in my own way. I loved Mr. Perfect. I loved Brian Pillman promos, guys. Like, they were a whole new emotional level. Same thing with Mr. Perfect. I love watching like Owen Hart. I love watching Ravishing Rick Rude. Could not get enough of his stuff. I watched a lot of Buddy Rose, and I watched a lot of, I think, was it Buddy Rogers? I think it was Buddy Rogers. I watched a lot of stuff, and I've gotten to get critiqued by a lot of different veterans too, which is invaluable, guys. It was priceless. You know, I got to have certain veterans that actually would sit down and watch my matches, and they would repeat stuff back that I did, so that I knew they weren't just jerking my chain, that they actually did take the time to watch, because I respectfully took the time to ask. You'd be surprised how many younger people, even people that have been in the business for more than 10 years, don't ask. So I got some really awesome feedback from one of my all-time favorite people that I studied, which I'll never forget. I was so green, and it was amazing to hear his like awesome feedback. Roddy Piper will always be one of my favorite people on the planet. He was so amazing to me. He was so supportive of me, so nice. It was just by far and away one of the best veteran experiences I ever had at such a young age. Another person who was really great to me, that taught me a lot with just the few shows that I was on with him, was Brutus the Barber Beefcake. I was on shows with Greg the Hammer Valentine. I was on shows with Tito Santana. I was on show. I did one show with Scott Hall. That was interesting. I did shows with the Hardy Boys, with Morrison, obviously Cody Rhodes. I did a lot of shows with a lot of people, but Roddy Piper, his feedback for me and Brutus Beefcakes was so awesome. So supportive and so smart and articulate. And the same thing with Princess Victoria. I met her when I was like very young. I met her right before my TNA release, like within like 2 weeks or so of my TNA release, and I had no idea, right? And she actually forewent making some money at this convention because I had enough respect to introduce myself and tell her, you know, what she did for the business meant for me and stuff. So she sat me down, had me pull up whatever I could find of myself at that time on YouTube, and she watched some of my stuff and gave me like awesome feedback for like an hour. And her, even the smallest little critiques made the world of difference. It was so amazing. I highly recommend more people doing that. I don't care how long you've been in the business. You can always learn something, especially if it's the right kind of veteran. People like her, they are not like crazy bitter. They just want to make the business that they love better, and they understand that it's changing, and they try to evolve with it. I think that makes the difference. And Roddy Piper was definitely one of those people. Princess Victoria was definitely one of those people. Leilani Kai was definitely one of those people. She's amazing. I don't know what she's doing now, but the few opportunities I got to be around her was like, I tried to be the biggest sponge I could be. Someone asked me what program I watch as far as wrestling. Since I'm writing about wrestling and I'm writing for wrestling, I try to watch as much as possible, from New Japan to NWA, MLW, AEW, Impact, WWE, AAA in Mexico, CMLL. I try to watch as much as possible, but because I'm such a busy person, it's like in small quantities because I'm doing so many different things. And someone asked me about the article that I was recently featured in for Yahoo Finance. It's the second time already in like the last like 6 months or less that I've been in it. And I'm so honored and so stoked. It's like, who would have thought this little nobody girl growing up in Massachusetts would, you know, one day be in Yahoo of all things, and Yahoo Finance. Like, that's just crazy. And it just talked about my journey and what kind of inspired me to write my next children's book. So I wanted to give a little brief rundown of that since someone took the time to ask and was so supportive about my story featured in that article. I'll put a link in the description of this video for anybody that wants to look up that article. It was featured in Yahoo Finance and ED Times, which is a huge thing for India. So when I was going through the journey of figuring out who I am as a person, who I want to be out in the world, why I love wrestling so much, what I want to do with my life, where I want to go, and what kind of human being I want to be in it, I felt very lost. And so I had to like go on this journey, and this journey that I had to go on that took several years worth of time, and even still I work on to this day. It's like, it's all these essential things that you need to succeed in life and to be happy and to define happiness and success for yourself. But we're not taught in any way on how to do that. It's insane. And I wish that we would do that more for kids, like self-love, happiness, and success, and learning how to define those things for yourself. It's like I always say, and it's actually featured in that article, all you need is love, guts, and gumption, guys. That's all you need. Okay, you know, money doesn't always make people happy. Sometimes it does. You know, being poor doesn't necessarily mean you're happy either. You know, you have to define what's important to you and what matters most to you. And for me, it's like all I honestly need is love, guts, and gumption. And I feel that's all anyone really needs, truly. You know, you need to realize, you need self-love to realize that you and your dreams matter, and to learn how to bet on yourself when no one else will. You have to have the guts to go after those dreams and to be a good person out in the world and cheer for yourself in the silence. And then you have to have the gumption to hold your head high and see your dreams through without sacrificing your integrity. All you need is love, guts, and gumption. And sometimes we are so busy getting caught up in keeping up with the Joneses that we forget who we are. We forget why we had those dreams when we were kids to begin with, and we get so caught up in the rat race of life. And we forget about who we are and who we want to be in the world, and we forget about our dreams, and then we end up living miserable lives. And I want to see less people end up like that. You know, I've seen so many people go into wrestling loving it and leave it hating it, and it breaks my heart. I don't want to be one of those people, and I don't want to see more of my peers like that. It's heartbreaking. And so that led me to this story that I started fiddling with in 2012, 2013, around the time that I was in Impact Wrestling. And that story came full focus in 2015 when I was told no. And it was a key opportunity where it meant life-changing for me to have a yes. And it was basically, if I would have received that yes, it would have been like I fulfilled my childhood dreams, and I fulfilled making the little girl I was proud of the adult I became, because she had to make way for me to grow up someday. And she had big dreams, and she was looking to me to be the adult she needed as a child. And that's what that yes would have meant. And I had to go on an even longer journey than expected to realize that being told no was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me, because it made me a stronger person. It made me a more dedicated person, made me a more loyal person to myself instead of what everybody else wanted me to be or said I was and put out into the universe that I was and lied saying I was. The only thing that mattered was me. I was the one in control of my story. I was the one in control of me and nobody else. And so that led to the biggest secret of all, which is, I think, another lesson that we all learn, is we're so busy going out in the world trying to discover everything that we forget that we have to also discover ourselves and who we are. So that led to my third children's book, Nosy Rosie and the Secret Surprise. And it's about an elephant named Rosie who has such a propensity to get her trunk stuck in everybody else's business. And, you know, she has a sloth friend named Sully who ends up being a race car driver. Nobody thought he could. He's a sloth. And then she has a fish friend named Trish who goes to be the first ever fish pilot and even designs her own plane for fish to fly other fish. And then when it comes down to Rosie, Rosie doesn't know what she wants to do. Rosie ends up finding that her dislike of secrets and surprises led to the biggest secret and surprise of all, who Rosie is and what Rosie wants out of life. So that was kind of the humble beginnings of that story. It will be my third in the installment of my series called A Long Book of Shorts of Sorts, the fantastical, nonsensical adventures of the furred kind, starring the Furred Herd. And the Furred Herd is a group of friends. They're basically a club called the Furred Herd, and it's all these different animals coming together to go on their own journeys of self-discovery and going after their dreams, the dreams that everyone else said were impossible, and they find the I'm possible in their dreams. And I feel that's an amazing lesson that we can all learn from, no matter how old we are. And the younger we learn it, the better off we'll be, and the better off I think the world will be. And to me, that's amazing. So thank you all. Make sure you comment below with more questions so we can continue doing Q&A Wednesday. I love getting to interact with you all. Be on the lookout for my next book, Nosy Rosie and the Secret Surprise, hitting Amazon very soon. I'll link the Yahoo Finance article so you guys can see what this person was asking about in regards to this question, and so much more. Get your questions in before next week. Be on the lookout for more match clips coming to my YouTube channel, as well as new episodes of my cooking show, Taylor's Tiny Kitchen, and my website, taelerhendrix.net, as well as more Fightful articles and my podcast, Talks with Taeler Hendrix. I have new guests coming up soon, as well as positive stories and so much more. I am busy, y'all. Taeler Hendrix.